how do you sell players to come play in New England? I think the easy answer is just pay them more money, which we can get to because I have questions about that with Kraft. How do you sell them? Is it as simple as Drake Maye?
So I think to put money to the side, because I think money is the number one thing everywhere. I know like Myles Garrett was saying it isn't the most important thing, but whatever. It is for almost every single player. Maybe you can find like a 1% of guys that isn't. So I think you can sell them on a few different things. One would be Drake Maye. I think another would be Mike Vrabel. I think both of those guys are pretty easy sells, to be honest. And then depending on the player and the position, don't you also sell them on their role and how important they're going to be to the turnaround? Like, I think if you brought in...
Right, it's like we have Vrabel, we have Drake Maye.
Yeah.
We have nothing else.
No.
You guys can be part of it. We're set at coach quarterback.
Yeah.
You guys can be part of the turnaround, and you're going to be the best player at your position. You're going to be a leader at your position.
Yeah.
You're going to get a lot of play. If you're a receiver or a running back, there's tons of playing time for you. Yeah.
Yeah, and like the NFL is different than the other sports too, because actually maybe the NBA is even becoming this way too. They're really like market proof. Like you don't have to play in New York, you don't have to play in LA to be, on every commercial and super famous. And like if you're winning and you're really good, you're gonna be there. Like you see Rob Gronkowski everywhere you go, right? Like you can do that. So if that's something that any of these players that aren't familiar with New England are worried about, I don't think they need to be worried about that at all. And just the nature of the NFL, bad teams can become good teams overnight. It happens all the time. Like you could point to a million examples. You could point to Washington this year, Houston last year, like on down the line, be like, hey, we could be that. Like, why can't we be that? We have a coach that knows what he's doing. We have a quarterback who is at least arrow pointing up. So yesterday when we did our top 10s, we didn't have him starting the year in the top 10, but doesn't mean he can't jump into that conversation at some point. They at least know who their guy is, which is a leg up on, 10 other teams.
No, for sure. So I think Vrabel's a good one. I think selling a player on their role is always a big one. And I think Drake Maye. I mean, you hope guys want to play with Drake Maye. I saw an interview with Myles Garrett yesterday. Maybe this is what you were referencing. Mm-hmm. But he was asked, I think, by Mina Kimes, would you want to play with a guy like Jaden Daniels? I mean, would that be a big factor? And it's like, well, yeah. You want to play with a good quarterback if you're a defensive player. Mm-hmm. You want to play with a guy on the other side of the field. He doesn't want to play with more Jameis Winston, Deshaun Watson, so? DTR.
Bailey Zappi?
Yeah, he doesn't want to play with those guys.
Oh, okay.
And so, of course, you want to play with a young, up-and-coming quarterback. Now, is Drake Maye viewed that way? I'm starting to wonder if we've even undersold it to a degree, Keefe, given how popular he's been, just interview media-wise, coming out of the Pro Bowl and into the Super Bowl, and these interviews, this is a local one, but there's been a bunch of national ones as well. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, just watching some of his popularity at the Pro Bowl with other players. He's going around interviewing guys, poolside, leading up to the Pro Bowl. And so maybe there is more of a draw with him than even we give it credit for.
Yeah, I think, when these guys come into the league as really high picks, like Mac Jones was a first-round pick, but he was 15th. There was 4 quarterbacks taken ahead of him. It was like maybe a little bit different. But Drake Maye, like all college year, there was thoughts about him being like the number 1 pick in the draft and everything like that. So he came in with a little bit of hype. And then he didn't start right away, but then once he started playing, I think, just what other teams were saying about him. Remember when they played the Rams and you heard like what Sean McVay had to say about him?
That's true.
Like there's definitely something that other players and coaches take notice of.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember how many of it was players. There definitely were coaches. McDaniel did it. I mean, McVay did it. Those are 2 great offensive minds, very complimentary.
I want to say Josh Allen might have when they played the Bills.
So,
I think,
so he might be an even bigger selling point than we prop it up to be. What's your confidence level Kraft is going to spend? Because I think that's the biggest impediment.
Lower than any of the other things. Like convincing someone that it's okay to play in New England and, selling them on joining a team that just won 4 games. A second-year quarterback, Mike Vrabel, like all of that stuff I think is a lot easier to sell when you have the money behind you. The fact that Robert Kraft is going to do it, I don't know. I was shocked he didn't do it last year. Now, maybe, did he learn his lesson, right? I think he maybe learned his lesson from just giving the job to Drake Maye. He at least changed that.
That's true.
So that's maybe a positive sign. I don't think you can be super cheap with it. I just wonder, would Mike Vrabel have accepted the job? So last year, different story. Drake Maye wouldn't have gotten any other job. So Drake Maye got the job, wanted to spend money, but I doubt he was given any assurances that they were going to do it. And so that's sort of different. Like, would Mike Vrabel take this job?
I think he might have thought he had some assurances early on.
Earned some cash, I understand, but like they quickly told him, like, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
But like, does Mike Vrabel take this job and hey, we're just going to bring back some of our own guys, and we're going to kind of like, cut corners here and be dead last in cash spending for the third straight year, I would like to think Mike Vrabel would be like, well, what are your expectations then? Like, how many games do you want us to win if we're not going to spend on players?
So I have a confidence they kind of have to spend. I mean, Kraft made reference to this at Vrabel's introductory press conference. They kind of have to spend. They look at it 3 years rolling annually, the money out. So they kind of have to spend. But are they going to get uncomfortable for big-ticket free agents? And I think you'll know that when you see it. Are they going to outmaneuver, outbid people for T. Higgins as a prominent name or Ronnie Stanley on the offensive line? Are they really going to go all out for some of these players, like a big-ticket item? This is kind of how we talk about the Red Sox here and there, and the Red Sox spend no money. I think the Patriots will spend some money. I think they kind of have to spend some money, and Kraft has foreshadowed that. Are they going to, again, outmaneuver other teams for a big-ticket free agent? Can you land that big fish and not turn around and say, well, this guy wanted to sign there because of his girlfriend, and that guy wanted to sign there.
It's not about finance.
No, it is about finance.
It's mostly about finance.
And so are you going to make it about finance and go get players this offseason?
Yeah.
At the top of the market, I still don't have confidence Kraft is going to do it. I hope he does, but I'm not confident in that at all.
So they have signed big free agents post-Brady. They haven't signed any big free agents post-Belichick. Right? You could be like, well, Belichick was the one signing him. But like in 2021, there was no Tom Brady selling point, and they were coming off a missed playoff year. And you could argue about how good any of these guys are, but like right away, they signed Matt Judon. They signed both Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. They signed Jalen Mills. They signed a few other guys. Like they were very, very active. I think Devon Godchaux might have been part of that wave.
Yep,
they signed like a ton of guys, and some of them were good. Some of them obviously weren't. But that's not the thing is. The thing is they spent a lot of money. Like they needed a tight end. We thought they needed one. They went out and got two. Now, whatever you want to say about those guys, but they were two of the three highest-ranked tight ends in free agency that year.
This would be my hope. 2021, it's great. They spent a ton of money. Yeah, whatever it was, $250 million. I don't remember. But they went out and spent like crazy. I'm not going to complain about that. But can you, beyond just Matthew Judon, who is a premium player, a premium position rather, can you spend at some premium positions? Not, let's double up at tight end, which is, I'm sorry, not a premium position.
Well, they got Kendrick Bourne that year.
I know, but that wasn't a top-of-the-market player that
No,
year.
it wasn't.
I mean, they spent on receivers, but the receivers they spent on were Aguilar and Bourne.
Yeah.
They spent at the top of the tight end market.
Drafted a quarterback.
Flip that. Why don't you spend on the real premium positions? I'll give him credit for Judon that year. Yeah. There wasn't much else. So spend at tackle, spend at receiver, spend at corner if you want to. Like, those are the spots to do it. And, again, I don't really have faith they're going to do that. I think they're going to spend more than they spent last year. I think they'll spend more because they have to. They haven't really spent in 3 years. But are they going to get those big-ticket players at premium positions? Like, if they do, I'll feel much better about the Patriots moving forward.
Don't you feel like that should be the case? I just feel like Bill was pretty unique in that where you would spend money. You'd have the highest-paid long snapper. You'd have, like, two of the highest-paid gunners. You would kind of prioritize these weird things. Even in the years before they got rid of Joe Thuney and Shaq Mason, they had like two of the four highest paid guards in the NFL. And you're like, what about wideout?
Right.
Like, what about pass rush? What about corner? Like, what about these guys? And I think, I don't know. I like to think Vrabel would look at that.
If he, like I said, if he does, then I'll feel much better going forward.
Time will tell.
If it's more of the same, they're spending money, but they're like last year they technically spent money. They just brought everybody back off their crappy team.
Yeah.
So not just spending the money, which would be good. How are you spending it, and who are you spending it on?